Hello. Welcome back to Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me, as always, is Nathan Kwan. This week has been considered the slowest week in sports because this is the time of year where it's the MLB All-Star game. We'll talk a little bit of that. We'll also do a midseason recap for both the Rangers and the Astros. Let's get started. First, let's talk about the All-Star game, which took place in Miami. Not only did Aaron Judge win the home run derby, but he also did it in stunning fashion by hitting 47 home runs total throughout the contest.
First on the home run derby, I don't know if you how much of that you watched, but that was ridiculous. I turned that on to watch the final between Judge and Miguel Sano, and all the commentators on ESPN were, because Miguel Sano went first, and they were just talking about Aaron Judge the whole time. And I was like, wait, I know there's the New York hype and the East Coast bias, and we know Aaron Judge has basically been the MVP of the league in the first half, but Miguel Sano's hitting. And then when Judge came up and basically won the derby in about a minute, I realized why they were talking about him. And then I went back and watched the highlights, and it was a man against boys. It wasn't even fair. It seemed like he needed a higher fence for him, or like turn the sliders down on the video game or something like that, because it wasn't fair the way he beat everybody up at that home run derby.
Big news from that in terms regarding the Texas Rangers and Houston Astros. Pudge Rodriguez, who won a World Series with the Florida Marlins back in 2003, I want to say. He was honored at the game and got to throw out the first pitch along with 13 other Latino legends. Anything that you want to discuss about the Houston Astros at the All-Star game?
Yeah, so it was a record 6 amount of Astros at the game. That was great to see all the guys out there. Most notably, Chris Davinsky got into the game, so I was very happy to see that. He pitched a 1-2-3, bottom of the 8th inning for the American League, included a strikeout of Joey Votto, so great to see Davinsky out there.
For sure, definitely. It's nice to see one of the better teams in all of MLB be recognized. Let's go ahead and sort of recap what's happened this year for both teams. Let's actually start with the team that right now is pretty much around 500 in the Texas Rangers. Essentially, the big story right now, at least from this past week, they won the series against the Angels 2-1. They got good performances from Hamels and Ross and Darvish also, although unfortunately for Darvish, he got the loss on Sunday, but that had more to do, I'd say, with just the fact that the Rangers could not score a run. The controversial part has been the bullpen. They've really struggled with that. Right now, they're kind of hoping that Jason Grilli can sort of offer a veteran presence in the bullpen, and he's actually been performing decently well. I mean, granted, they've sort of brought him in during games that are sort of already out of hand in terms of it's more than 3 runs for the lead, but he's performed well. And I think he's really helped stabilize the position a bit, and let's see if that keeps going. Another thing to consider with the Rangers bullpen is that they're still fairly young. Granted, like even with when they had Sam Dyson, who was a very experienced closer, basically by this point this year, he was still very young at the time. Now, granted, he's now closing for the Giants, and right now they're just sort of in the middle of trying to figure out who should be the closer. Last night, they decided to let Alex Claudio close. That, I believe, is going to be a bad decision just because you're pretty much your only lefty in the whole bullpen, so you can't really bring him out in situations that call for one if you decide to make him your closer, and B, he's not a high strikeout guy. I don't remember his K per 9, but it's not above 9, I believe. So it'd be nice to see him improve, but at the same time, like they definitely need to keep looking for it. And at the end of the day, more than likely, it's just going to be a closer by committee. That being said, also another controversial aspect of this Rangers team has been essentially the offensive numbers. I believe they lead the league right now, or at least are close to leading the league right now in strikeouts. But they also are one of the best teams in terms of hitting home runs. A lot of comparisons have been drawn to, I believe, the Astros earlier this decade, which very much was like, hit home runs or get a strikeout. There's not a lot of high average people on this team. I mean, the most consistent one right now is Elvis Andrews. I mean, Adrian Beltre has come back from missing the first 2 months and has been hitting the cover off the ball and has been fantastic. But Elvis Andrews has been a very pleasant surprise and has really settled in as a consistent offensive presence. And that's been real nice to see. I mean, he honestly got robbed of being selected to the All-Star game. I mean, he definitely deserved to be recognized, and unfortunately he came up short in the fan vote. The other big news, best indication of how the rest of the team is doing is kind of Joey Gallo, who's we kind of expected him to be someone that's going to be a high strikeout person, probably have a low batting average, but hit a ton of home runs, and he's pretty much been promising as delivered. He still has a OPS above .800 just because of the amount of home runs he's hit, but right now he's sort of just platooning first base along with Mike Napoli, who also is very low average, high strikeout, but also hits a lot of home runs. Another example of that also is Rougned Odor, who really struggled at the beginning of the year after basically after the first series against Cleveland, where the first game of the year he had 2 home runs. Pretty much after that, he pretty much went into a slump where he would be below the Mendoza line for almost a month, and then now he's above it, and he seemed to have changed his approach and is now finding some success, but at the same time it might be a little bit too little too late for him. Mazzara has been okay. He's gone from just being like one of the hottest hitters in the league to one of the coldest to being one of the hottest to being one of the coldest. At the end of the day, the big thing is just like consistency for this team. The starting rotation is arguably the biggest strength for this team, which is surprising for people who followed this team since the 2000s and remember in the mid 2000s how starting pitching would always be one of the worst parts of this team, and now it's become its biggest strength. I mean, Yu Darvish was the only All-Star selection from the Texas Rangers, but it was well deserved. I absolutely love Yu Darvish. He's just one of the best pitchers to ever play for the Texas Rangers. I really hope we re-sign him in the offseason. I mean, goes without saying. I've been saying it multiple times. Beyond him, we've also had some success with Andrew Kashner. I mean, he started off fairly strong when he came in, but since then he's kind of tailed off a bit. But I mean, like he's someone that's supposed to be performing as your like sort of your 4th to 5th best starter on the rotation, and that's kind of what he is at this point, which isn't bad. It's useful, but I mean at the same time, you like to see a little bit more. Other guys who have been able to do spot starts have been pleasantly surprising at times. Specifically, Austin Beavens-Jerks is probably the best example of someone who kind of just came out of nowhere and did a few spot starts here and there and was really good. I think he had maybe 1 to 2 shutout performances, or at least like quality starts, which for someone who's really never performed much above AAA. Even then, he was kind of a reliever. That's truly impressive. Nick Martinez also has done some yeoman's work, but I mean, at the end of the day, also he's been who he has been for the past like 2 years, which is just you'll be lucky if he gives you a quality start. But I mean, he's also someone that's going to soak up innings. Beyond that, though, you have Hamels and Ross and Perez, who have been mixed, but I would say of those 4, Ross and Hamels have definitely come on strong as of late, and Perez seems to at least sort of like figured out who he is as a player. I mean, he got the win last night after pitching 7 innings and only giving up 3 earned runs to get a quality start. I mean, he is who he is. Like he's at best a middle of the rotation pitcher, but he's doing okay. And Perez's peripherals, specifically his FIP, are okay. And so, I mean, I would say his numbers, his ERA right now is like 4.55, but I mean, it's possible to see it go down to at least like maybe like a lower 4 ERA to maybe a high 3 ERA. He's a decent performer, and he's not being paid exorbitantly. I mean, the biggest problem with the starting rotation right now has just been staying healthy. I mean, you obviously have Tyson Ross, who missed the first 2 months of the season. Cole Hamels, who also missed another 2 months. And then Yu Darvish, I mean, like at least has been really healthy. But you also really hope that he can stay in there and hang in there. Ross is just recovering from the injury that he got during spring training. I mean, he really only had one really, really bad outing this year. When he got back. But I mean, even then, since then, he's gone from outing to outing, one going that was like really good to one that's going really bad. And then you have one that's going with like decent or okay, and one which is just like sort of disappointing. But I mean, at the end of the day, that I would say that has a heck of a lot more to do with just like recovering from injury and just sort of like getting up to speed. And so for the Rangers, it's going to be a very interesting 10-game road trip, because this could really decide whether or not the Rangers are going to be selling or buying at the deadline. And this team's future is really going to depend on the next 10 games. Right now, they're going to be playing at Kansas City. They took the first game in the series. Like, this is not the same team that made it to back-to-back World Series and won it the second time around. Like, this team is just sort of just really hanging in there. Baltimore is not a good team anymore. It's not really that good a team. I mean, the offense is always going to be fairly strong with them, but I mean, like, at this point, like, their starting rotation is just atrocious. I mean, in spite of the fact that Dylan Bundy has actually been fairly good since coming back. But and then we finish off the road trip with games against Tampa Bay. Even though they lost their manager and Joe Madden to the Cubs and Drew Friedman to the Dodgers, they've always been able to field a decent team. So that one's going to be an interesting one to see going forward. What about the Astros?
Yeah, so recap of the first half, it was a sensational season. It's, again, record-setting pace for the Astros franchise history, and I think they're second all-time with the biggest division lead at the All-Star break to the 2001 Mariners. They had a 16.5-game lead going into the break. They won 60 games in the first half, one of two teams to do that, along with the LA Dodgers, who are looking very scary in the National League. But overall, again, the team is being carried by the number one offense in baseball, led by the three All-Stars and George Springer, Jose Altuve, and Carlos Correa. But they've also gotten contributions up and down the lineup. We've mentioned Yulieski Gurriel, Josh Reddick, Marwin Gonzalez, who many thought was an All-Star snub. So that offense just explosive at any time. Last night they scored 8 runs in the second inning to chase Jose Berrios of the Twins, and they held on for a win. But the weaknesses of this team are in the pitching staff. So we've talked a lot about the starting pitching. A lot of it is due to injuries. Dallas Keuchel has missed a lot of time, that lingering neck issue. Lance McCullers has missed time. Charlie Morton has missed time. Colin McHugh has yet to make a start this season for the team. And so they're hoping to get some of those guys back. Colin McHugh has been making some rehab starts down in AA Corpus Christi, and he threw 74 pitches in his last start. He's going to make one more down there on Sunday and rejoin the rotation, hopefully next weekend in Baltimore. And then Keuchel, I think they're bringing him back slowly. He threw 2 innings of a simulated game the other day at Minute Maid Park. So hopefully we'll get him back. So the rotation, once they get healthy, we'll see what status they are. I still think most fans would like to add another innings-eating pitcher. I will say, after the deal for Jose Quintana, which we'll talk about in a bit, I think, man, the trade market, I mean, I think the White Sox got a huge haul. So we'll see what general manager Jeff Luna is willing to part with in a trade for a starter. The bullpen also, I would like to see an addition there. The bullpen's been struggling, been mediocre throughout the season. I think they're 14th overall in bullpen ERA. The back end with Ken Giles, I mean, you never know what you're going to get with him. He's really inconsistent. Will Harris has been one of your most solid pitchers the last 2 years, but he just landed on the 10-day disabled list with shoulder inflammation. And so hopefully that's not a big injury, because the rest of the guys, other than the All-Star Chris Devenski, who's been great, Luke Gregerson struggled, Tony Sips struggled, Michael Feliz has been really volatile, and then James Hoyt's been pretty bad. So there's been rumors out there that they're targeting a loogie, Justin Wilson of the Tigers, or Brad Hand of the Padres, who is an all-star. You know, we saw the importance of the bullpen and what it did for the Indians last year with that threesome with Shaw, Miller, and Cody Allen, and then the Cubs with getting Aroldis Chapman. So it's now interesting because pitching staffs are so dependent on bullpens now, that starters aren't throwing as many innings and getting deep into games. You need those relievers to come in and shut the door when you have the lead in late innings. But they won last night against the Twins to start out the second half. They're going to have another 3-game set with the Mariners, and then they go to Baltimore to face the Orioles this upcoming week. But I want to go back to the Quintana deal. The Cubs apparently are buyers as they get Jose Quintana, a lefty starting pitcher. Has been really good for Chicago the last couple of years, and he goes from the south side to the north side. What are your thoughts on that deal?
Well, I mean, I guess it's good news for Quintana because he doesn't have to find a new house or anything like that. Dang, yeah, that's a huge price to pay for someone that's kind of been struggling this year. I mean, granted though, they still have his rights for years to come after this, so they're just hoping that he sort of bounces back and sort of. I mean, it's weird to say a change of scenery even because like he's still just going to be living in Chicago. So I mean, kind of hard to say that, but I mean at the same time too, I mean like he's still fairly young. I believe he's below 30 years old, so I mean he's still he's still in his prime. He's still got a chance to change things. And I mean the thing about the Chicago too is that like they were depending on Jake Arrieta to be who he was before, which was a Cy Young winner, a Cy Young competing candidate as a pitcher. But now he's like, it looks like Arrieta is really tailed off, and it's hard to tell whether or not he's ever going to come back to his former form. And not only that, but like he's going to become a free agent at the end of this year, and like so you're not entirely sure what to expect out of him going forward, since now he's going to be over 30. And so you've essentially replaced one question mark with another, but at least it's a cheaper question mark than before. Now that being said, the Chicago Cubs paid a heavy price to get Quintana. They gave up Eloy Jimenez, he was the top prospect in Chicago system and is the fifth best prospect in all of MLB. And then on top of that, you add in some pretty decent players as well. Like, I mean, it wasn't just him, but you have some mid-level guys thrown in. And so, I mean, like you're looking at a pretty high price going forward for starting pitching, as you consider that Quintana was not performing all that well this year. Now, that being said, like he was someone that arguably could have won the Cy Young in the AL last year. I mean, unfortunately, I think some votes ended up splitting between him and Chris Sale, his teammate at the time. But I mean, like, that being said, and just to go back to it, I mean, like Chicago White Sox have done an incredible job of rebuilding. Like, I mean, like you just look through like the list of prospects that they added. And I mean, Yohan Moncada is about to like be called up to the major league team. You just look at the amount of prospects that they've acquired, and I mean, like even if only half of them pan out, like this could be a scary team in the future. I mean, that's the other crazy thing too to think about is just like how this team just like weirdly unfortunate it's been for the Chicago White Sox to have all this talent on their team, and yet none of them really being able to line up all at the same time and perform at such a high level that they could have made it into the playoffs. You know, at the end of the day, like I mean, they lucked out in getting the prospects that they did, but at the end of the day, they're still prospects, and you never know if they're going to be able to pan out at the same time. I mean, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I like you. I was kind of stunned by the amount of prospects they needed to give up. I mean, Jose Quintana's name has been in the trade market ever since the offseason when they sold away Chris Sale and Adam Eaton. So, I mean, this White Sox team wasn't going to contend this year. And you have a pitcher that has thrown 200 innings in the past 4 seasons. I mean, not many guys can say that. His ERA the last 4 years has been 3.20, 3.36, 3.32, 3.51. So this is an innings eater. I mean, his stats aren't that good this year, 4.49 ERA, but there's a lot of sabermetrics that back up that his performance has been adequate, and he's just gotten unlucky with some of the way the ball bounces. And so we'll see if switching over to the National League and joining a contending team, or at least a team that thinks it's still contending in the Cubs, will rejuvenate his success that he's had the last couple of years. I think the White Sox have done really well with this rebuild. They had a lot of individual players that had a lot of value, were on very friendly contracts, and they've taken advantage of that and dealing that for as many prospects as they can get. And I think, I mean, this is all following what the Sixers did in the NBA. I mean, even if you look back in baseball, what the Astros have done the last 5 years, just building through the farm, and you see all the core guys coming up right now and contributing: Springer, Altuve, Correa, and they got more on the way. So, I mean, I think that they've done a great job. And for the Cubs, I mean, coming off that World Series last year, I think this shows that they still believe in the guys. I mean, they have pretty much the same team, and that team was historic last year, and they're just not performing this year. And they have a lot of problems in the starting rotation, and getting a guy who's 28 and who's under team control for at least the next 3 years, I think is smart for building to the future. And prospects, as you said, are prospects. Like, they're ranked really highly, but I mean, look at what happened to Jerickson Profar, right? Like, it's still kind of a bet that you hope that they'll do well, and you never know. There's so many things that can happen that could prevent that.
Absolutely. And I guess the other big thing in MLB concerning both the Rangers and the Astros is Alex Bregman getting into some Twitter drama. What's your take?
Yeah, basically what happened was he's had a bunch of issues on Twitter recently. Earlier this year, he called out Rougned Odor during the World Baseball Classic for not running out a fly ball. Then he tweeted hashtag BTSOOTR right before they played the Rangers. And then this past week, he got into a very interesting thing on Twitter where he direct messaged a fan. And the fan had tweeted some things about like we should trade Bregman for like a starting pitcher. He has a lot of value right now. Maybe going to like a Chris Archer or something like that. And then the strangest part was Bregman wasn't even tagged in the tweet. I guess when you get mentioned, right, you get a notification. And I don't know how athletes or celebrities, they probably get tagged in millions of tweets a day, but this tweet he wasn't tagged. And so the only way he would have been able to find this guy's tweet was if he searched his name on Twitter. I don't know. Is that an ego thing or like, I don't know what's wrong with that, but he ended up deleting his Twitter and then he reactivated it. And Carlos Beltran actually tweeted at him, "From now on, send me DM." And so it looks like they're kind of laughing it off in the clubhouse, but kind of bizarre incident with him. If I were him, I'd kind of stay away from that social media. I mean, I do follow him on Instagram, but direct messaging fans is kind of, I think, going a little bit over the edge.
Yeah, it's absolutely dumb. And like then like he comes back around and like restarts his Twitter account. I mean, like you think that he'd like have learned proper etiquette by now for how to engage on social media with fans. I mean, especially since like this guy had 3 years at LSU, right? Granted, it's not like I've had like a great presence on social media myself after 4 years, but like at the same time, I'm not a public figure, and that's the other thing too that I think Alex Bregman is struggling with to understand is that he's a public figure that people are going to know about, and even then, I mean, some of the stuff he says just like makes like no sense. Like him DMing that guy for saying that the Astros might be better off trading Alex Bregman. The fan actually had a pretty good point, which is just saying like, hey, we can save on all our prospects and just move Marwin Gonzalez over to third base going forward if we just include Alex Bregman in a deal for someone. And then like that's not a bad point. Especially considering that Bregman has, while he's been fairly decent hitting, he's not exactly the person that's absolutely killing it. He's got to be smarter than that. He's got to be better than that. And I think he can be better than that.
Yeah, I think you got to learn. When you're a professional athlete, celebrity, anybody that's famous that has a lot of money, you're going to get hate from, justified or not, from anybody. Like when JJ Watt tweets out like some inspirational quote, there's always like 3 or 4 fans that like tweet something completely unrelated and hateful and insulting at him. And where does that even come from? But you got to know that that's just the way that it is with social media, where like any fan can tweet anybody and there's not really any repercussions or consequences for that fan to do that, and you just gotta shrug it off and keep going forward and look to improve, because he's been okay this year. His WAR is 0.9, so he's been about 1 run above replacement, not carrying the team per se, but he doesn't need to, and he just needs to continue hitting. I think he's made adjustments at the plate earlier in the year. A lot of guys were throwing sliders at him, and he started to shoot the ball the other way more. And last night he had a big double that kickstarted that 8-run second inning. So yeah, stay off the social media, and we'll need you down the stretch in the future.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's move over to NBA. 2 big things, but Jonathan Simmons was a restricted free agent for the San Antonio Spurs and someone who performed fairly well, especially during the playoffs. But he had his restricted free agent rights renounced by the San Antonio Spurs as they tried working out a deal to bring him back. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen because Jonathan Simmons has just signed a 3-year deal worth $20 million total with the Orlando Magic, which is a very surprising move considering that the Orlando Magic are still in the middle of a rebuild. But then on top of that, there have been talks about the Spurs having offered him Simmons $9 million a year, and this is clearly less than that. So I mean, I don't know what Jonathan Simmons is thinking. What's your take on this deal?
Yeah, it's really strange to me. I don't know what the rationale is. Usually you see a player on a good team, a role player that wants to have an increased role and also wants more money, and then he leaves. But in this case, he leaves for less money. It's going to be more playing time, a bigger role in Orlando, but it's going to be tough for him to be a role player on a good team when there's other good players around you, like a Kawhi Leonard, the Marcus Aldridge. They got Rudy Gay now. They can create and you can stay off the ball. And then when you get the ball, you have a secondary defender on you rotating over and you can attack. When you're the guy, you're the focus of the opposing team's defense. So it's going to be tougher for you. So I don't really understand this for him, but his life, his personal decision, and we'll see how it ends up. It hurts the Spurs, I think, the short term, because Simmons was so important for them last year. We saw what he did facing James Harden and the Rockets in that second round series. He was explosive in getting to the rim, and his defense on Harden was impressive. It opened my eyes to the level of player he is. And he's from the Houston area, so shout out to him for making a career move. But I think it's going to hurt San Antonio a little bit. So they try to keep pace with Golden State in the West.
Definitely. But I would say the big news right now going on in terms of free agency for Texas teams is the Houston Rockets, who are looking like they're trying to go all in for the time being, as so long as they have James Harden in his prime, which they should, is that they're right now trying to make a trade for Carmelo Anthony. And talks were getting pretty serious this week up until either Thursday or Friday, where it looks like the talks have kind of died down right now, just because they can't seem to pull it off. But that being said, what's your take on the Rockets trying to get Melo?
Yeah, not a huge fan. So I already expressed reservations on Chris Paul coming to the Rockets and his fit with James Harden, how each of them would play off the ball. I've kind of warmed more to that. Maybe that was the afterglow of Chris Paul's press conference yesterday and him throwing out the first pitch and him meeting the fans. But Carmelo, we know the player he is. He's 33 years old now. He's been in the league. He's been a scoring champ. But at this point in his career, how does he fit in with Harden and Paul? He's still a scorer, but he's been injured. He doesn't play any defense. I don't think he gives you anything off the ball when he doesn't have it in his hands. A lot of fans were mad at him for kind of impeding the progress of Kristaps Porzingis. And I think last year was finally like he started to share the ball more, take less shots, but I don't like it. There's going to be one ball, and Chris Paul and James Harden are probably going to have it the most to create. Melo's not a creator. He can rebound a little bit, but how the parts fit together is more important than just signing star power. Ultimately, Daryl Morey will do what he believes is best for the team, and I'm going to have to accept that as a fan, and I'll probably still root for the team, but it hasn't happened yet, and I really don't hope for it to happen at this point.
To play devil's advocate and defend this, the possible deal, it's hard to see this Houston team as constructed as being able to beat the Golden State Warriors. And granted, this team had a lot of success last year, but also at the same time, you have to look at it as just, this is the best chance that the Houston Rockets have of winning a championship in a while. You've got to try to maximize it. And right now, you look at what Carmelo would conceivably be trying to replace, which is Ryan Anderson and Trevor Ariza or something like that, possibly Eric Gordon. I hope they don't get rid of Eric Gordon, because Eric Gordon's a pretty important piece to this team. But honestly, I think there might be a little bit of a underrating with Carmelo, because you just look at his performances with the U.S. men's national team, and he's someone that can perform well when he's not the one that has to carry the team. When he's just someone that you can spot up and just shoot and doesn't have to create his own shot necessarily, he's someone that can really play very well. And this is also someone that should be very, very hungry for a championship, because this is of the people from that 2003 draft. He's one of the few superstars from that one that still does not have a ring. And granted, he is someone that in all fairness, I do agree with you. I think he did impede on Kristaps Porzingis' development, as well as also he kind of ran Jeremy Lin out of town when Jeremy Lin was kind of already coming to his own as well. They had his restricted free agent rights, and they decided not to match it, even though he was performing very well for that New York Knicks team, and there was no reason not to try to bring him back. But that also being said, I think Melo at this point might, not to overly be punny here, but may have mellowed out by now. I know he didn't exactly get along with D'Antoni back when they were both together in New York. But at this point, Melo's 33, like you said, and he's beginning to see he can't win on his own anymore. Like like if he wants to win a championship, he's got to play ball with other players. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens going forward. I mean, like this team. I mean, the New York Knicks just got a new GM, very competent one. I mean, a friend of mine who's a huge New York Knicks fan almost fainted due to how they actually made a good move for the front office. But that being said, I mean, we'll see what happens. They said that they might try working on ways to keep Carmelo Anthony at this point. But also at the same time, I mean, you got to, like, if I'm the Knicks, you got to really consider trading Carmelo and trying to get as many future prospects as you can and try to rebuild around Kristaps, because Kristaps, for sure, I think at this point, you have to say that this guy's going to be a superstar in this league if he's not already. I mean, that being said, I think this team is better with Carmelo on it than without it. And may stand a better chance of beating the Golden State Warriors than if they didn't have him. It's just a matter of like how much they're going to lose in terms of player personnel.
I'm going to disagree. So again, USA basketball is a comparison that's thrown out again and again. It's completely different circumstances. International basketball, the talent divide between USA and the other countries is so high that the issues with fit aren't really shown, because it's like if you have the argument, the best college football team against the worst NFL team, who's going to win? It's always going to be the worst NFL team. Like, I don't even understand why that's an argument. You can have all the glaring weaknesses with your defense or your quarterback or your special teams, but the NFL team has more talent. Every single one of those NFL players is on a professional team is because he was one of the best college players. And no matter how great a college football team you are, you're going to not have 53 NFL caliber players. To me, this is the same equivalency where you're putting 3 superstars on the Rockets, and I'm not even going to call Carmelo a superstar at this point. His 3-point percentage the last couple of years has been 36%, 34%, 34%. Arguably, Ryan Anderson's more important and a better fit for this team, especially if you have Harden and Paul creating and they have the ball in their hands 80% of the time. When you swing to Ryan Anderson on the 3-point line, all he has to do is catch and shoot. With Carmelo, he's not as prolific a shooter as Ryan Anderson. And I mean, I don't think the talent level of the Rockets will overwhelm Golden State. I mean, they have 4 guys of their own. And I guess much was made of just Golden State's like level of talent, but it's also the way they play and the way they fit together. You have Steph Curry, who can shoot from anywhere. He can also create. Klay Thompson can catch off the bounce. Durant is your second creator for Curry, but then he can also run off screens. He can play down in the block. He can rebound. And then Draymond just does everything. Like he does all the dirty work. He defends. He grabs rebounds. He gets assists. So it's also the fit of Golden State and their talent level. And I just don't see the level of fit. A lot of people in Houston media have kind of compared this to the Barkley, Olajuwon, Scottie Pippen trio that they tried to put together in the late 90s that ended up being a disaster. And I mean, it's not far off, right? So you still have Harden in his prime, but Paul and Anthony on the downsides of their careers, they both have injury issues the last couple of years. So I don't know. I don't think this will end up well if they end up going that route. I mean, I'd rather just keep the core you had and see what Chris Paul can get into James Harden with some leadership and continue to add depth to what you had last year.
Yeah, we'll definitely see things going forward. Definitely. I mean, another good question is what depth is available out there that you can get, but we'll see going forward.
Not big on the Tariq Black signing, huh?
No. Well, I mean, I don't. It's not that I dislike Tariq Black. I think he's a good player. It's just like, you know, he's a depth guy. But we'll see. I mean, at least he's someone that should be like, you know, your third center or something like that. You know, and help.
Jochi hype train.
Yeah, I like Jochi. I liked what I saw from Summer League, which I guess is a good segue into talk about that, at least for the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, the Houston Rockets, they had a decent performance in Summer League with Jochi performing fairly well, and it's probably the biggest thing out of to take away from Houston Summer League.
Troy Williams as well.
Yeah, Troy Williams as well was very good. But the biggest thing happening in Texas in terms of Summer League is really been the Dallas Mavericks. They have yet to lose a game in Summer League, including the Orlando League, which they ended up winning the entire one. So shout out to them on that one. But now the Las Vegas version of it, which is basically kind of the main version where all the teams get to play in the same league. The big news coming from that is just like how good Dennis Smith has been. I mean, good Lord. I mean, like we talked about him when he was drafted and how like this guy is just like super athletic and he should be a good fit in Rick Carlisle's system going forward. And at least he's someone that gives a good shot. But like, good Lord, I mean, this guy is just phenomenal. I mean, like his passing was really underrated, just mostly because that NC State team was just so bad, and there was really no one he could pass to. But I mean, even on this team where there's also like not really a whole lot of shooters on this team beyond him and Yogi Ferrell, and even like Ding to some extent. I mean, like it's just so obvious like how great his vision is on the court, and how explosive a shooter he is. He's someone that can really take it to the hoop. He's able to really muscle himself in there, and like he can also just like sort of like he jumps and like he kind of floats for a bit, which is weird to say, but like he can contort his body fairly well. Maybe not as well as Derrick Rose was in his prime, but like he's someone that can get to the hoop and get a layup, or he's been trying to, and he's kind of been failing at it, and he's also had trouble with his landing, which has been really concerning. But he's tried to end a few careers by like just dunking, and he's come so close so many times, and it's just been phenomenal. And then his 3-point shooting has been pretty good. I mean, like we knew it was kind of inconsistent coming in, but it seems like he's already hit his stride. He's hit 40% from 3 so far this summer league, and that's fairly impressive. And then he's already had 47% total in field goals. The only thing that he really seems to struggle with is just like trying to remind himself to slow the game down sometimes, because sometimes he allows it to speed up and then he turns the ball over a bit too much. But beyond that, I mean, like this is a 19-year-old playing against like not the best competition, but I mean, like if you're a 19-year-old playing against people that are trying to make it in the league and are very hungry, and they're like 25 and they're like someone with a lot of like experience, and being able to outplay those people, like that is still very impressive. And so I'm just very excited for Dennis Smith and the way he's been playing. So let's go to shoutouts now. First off, shout out to the NBA for trying to address problems with pace of play. I mean, granted, both me and Quan agree that pace of play is probably a bigger problem in college football and baseball. But the big change for NBA is that you only have 2 timeouts during the final 2 minutes, I believe. And so we'll see how that goes. But I mean, at least that should make for very interesting end of games, and kind of make those end of games at least exciting. Going forward. Also, shout out to Pablo Sandoval, who had arguably one of the worst contracts in recent memory. He just got DFA'd, and after having a negative 2.6 WAR for the Boston Red Sox over 3 seasons, and is still going to be paid for 3 more.
Would you say Boston's eating the rest of that contract?
I would, but I'm not insensitive, so I wouldn't. So also shout out to Dak Prescott for winning SB for Best Breakthrough Athlete of the Year. I mean, it's an SB, so it doesn't really matter all that much. But, you know, I mean, it's nice to see Dak Prescott earning the recognition, especially since he might be the only player playing for Dallas by this point at the beginning of the year, with the way so many Cowboys have been either arrested or are possibly facing suspension. And also, I guess, shout out to Sam Curry for upsetting number 1 seeded Andy Murray. I mean, last year he beat Djokovic, and now he's beating Andy Murray in the quarterfinals. I mean, unfortunately, he lost to Thomas Burgess into the semis. But hey, you know, making it to the Final Four, essentially, of Wimbledon is a huge feat. And I mean, considering where men's tennis has been for Americans, the fact that we're finally getting some people into the semis is like nice to finally see. Shout out also to Garbine Muguruza for beating Venus Williams in the finals for Wimbledon. I mean, also just really shout out to Venus Williams, because like, I mean, like she's someone who I remember when I first started playing tennis, like she was, must have been back in 2001, like Venus was already top of the game and all that. And this was before Serena started like kind of coming into her own, and she's still playing, and she's almost made it to the, you know, she's making it to the finals of major tournaments still. Like, I mean, she's Iron Man essentially, you know, just crazy stuff. But yeah, congrats to both those two.
Yeah, and Roger Federer is going to play Marin Cilic tomorrow in the men's final. He talked about the run Roger Federer's on. He's yet to lose a set in this Wimbledon so far, and so we'll see if he can complete winning another title at the All-England Club tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the golden age of tennis in some semblance. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it's a shout out for me, another SB, Deshaun Watson, quarterback of the Houston Texans, winning the best college male athlete for his performance in the national championship of Clemson over Alabama. And then shout out finally MLS. FC Dallas unfortunately lost in the U.S. Open Cup quarterfinals in Kansas City. It was a wild match, 2 red cards, bunch of yellow cards, and it went to extra time, and Kansas City put 3 up on the board in that extra session, and they won 3-0. So FCD will be going home in that competition. They're off this week. The Dynamo are back to MLS action. They play at Minnesota. They're the worst team in the West. So yet another opportunity to get their first road win. We'll see if they can get it done. And also Gold Cup is happening. U.S. men's national team, I believe, beat Martinique, squeaked out a 3-2 win. It was very disappointing. Granted, it's the U.S. men's national team's C team, but to have to squeak out a win against a tiny country in Martinique is very discouraging for Bruce Arena and that squad. I urge you guys to visit our website, TwoNatesOnSports.com. Also, like us on Facebook at TwoNatesOnSports. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. And we also have an email address, so send us any comments and suggestions to TwoNatesOnSports@gmail.com. Nathan, I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you then, man.